It's time for the show about the people and the places of the Carolinas with the occasional visitors. In addition to hosting the award-winning syndicated TV show Life in the Carolinas, Carl White writes a weekly syndicated column and now hosts this weekly show, the Life in the Carolinas podcast. Now you can hear the story about the stories. And now, here's your host, Carl White.
Mary Bohlen, it certainly is good to see you again, friend.
Thanks so much.
Oh, I look forward to catching up with you today, and I know everybody else does as well. Our own official Daniel Boone aficionado, right?
Right.
Even bigger than that. Tell folks what you do, Mary.
I'm the president of the North Carolina Daniel Boone Heritage Trail.
So that's a big thing, right?
It is for me.
But you and I met some years ago, and you were doing interpretive cooking as to a period of time, and that all worked with a book that you've authored that's done quite well. Let's tell folks who you are. Now we know some of what you do. I just gave away a couple of things there, but let's talk about who you are and what your background is.
Okay. Well, I've always loved history. When I was a youngster, I loved history. My father took us to Appomattox Courthouse when I was about 11 years old. And if I had to look back now on a timeline, I'd say that's when I could mark my time of knowing that history was something that I absolutely loved.
So it imprinted on you at that moment.
Right.
So you actually remember that being a aha moment.
Yes, it was. And as I got older, I never lost the love of history. But you have family and children, you get married, you have a home, but that still stuck with me. So I joined a Revolutionary War reenactment.
Now, how old were you when that happened?
I was grown. I had children then.
Okay.
But I was doing that locally.
So now, where were you born?
I was born in Tallahassee, Florida.
So see, I didn't know that till right now about you. Okay.
But I married a man from Charlotte, so that's how I ended up here.
So that's where you got your current last name?
No, this is my maiden name.
Okay. All right.
Or we learn if we got a lesson.
Oh, yeah, this is good.
I went back to my maiden name.
Okay, all right, after a spell of something else. Okay, so Mary Bohlen now, which is what you started out with.
Right.
Yeah, all right, good. From Florida, you found your way to North Carolina.
Well, interesting that when we were little, our vacations were camping. My daddy was cheap.
Okay. Right.
We went camping. That's a cheap vacation. And so that's where I was really introduced into the mountains of North Georgia and North Carolina, the Blue Ridge Parkway, and I absolutely loved it.
Oh, sure.
And I've never lost that love either. But I graduated from UNC Charlotte in 1986. Okay. I'm a late bloomer.
Right.
Very late bloomer. And I taught school for a while, worked at the North Carolina Transportation Museum where the steam engines are.
I love that museum.
And I loved that because my grandfather worked for Southern Railroad and he was there.
Oh, wow.
I remember him telling me that he was there. He worked in Richmond, so he was on the trains from Richmond to Asheville or Bristol or Atlanta.
So you grew up having some rich cultural experiences, right?
Yes.
And what you refer to as your dad being cheap and taking you camping, a lot of people, that's a luxury now.
Well...
But he was cheap.
He was very frugal, but he loved the outdoors.
Oh, well.
And at the time, well, are you kidding? We loved it. We played in the creek. We caught little minnows or salamanders.
Mary, if let's say your dad had plenty of money and wasn't so conservative with his money and you were at a great hotel, you would never have had those natural experiences.
I see that now.
Yeah.
I see that now. So, I mean, we camped in a tent, an old Army tent, on Army cots.
Okay.
Boiled water over a campfire.
Right.
But anyway, I look back now, and that's one of the greatest gifts that he ever gave me, was that the history and the camping, which was, for him, was probably never planned.
Right.
But it just happened.
So as a young girl, let me ask you this, because I'm seeing a pattern develop here with you. So as a young girl, you discovered the outdoors, and you said boiled water over the campfire. So you were having nature and primitive cooking from a very young age.
Somewhat, yes.
Okay. All right. Okay.
I loved it.
I'm seeing some patterns.
The smell of a campfire.
Right.
It just does something to me. It evokes, I don't know, it's something. Even now, when I left my home this morning, I smelt smoke from a nearby house, from the chimney. You can pick it up real quick,
right?
And it's a very comforting.
So it soothes you. It's soothing.
It does.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
All right.
So then I went to the North Carolina Museum of History. I was the Tar Heel Junior Historian Program Coordinator, and for a few years, and that was a fantastic experience. Met a lot of people, some of whom are still my friends, and then eventually moved back to this part of the state and landed where I am now, and absolutely love it.
Nice. So let's talk about that journey, that in the midst of all of this, when did you start doing the interpretive work as far as the presentation of Rebecca Boone's style of cooking?
I took a class at the Atlanta Historical Society, or it's now called the Atlanta History Center, I believe, back in the mid-'80s. And it was a day-long class, and they have a cooking guild there, and they cook every day. But they offered a class. It was $25 for a Saturday. We made fried chicken, boiled corn on the cob, green beans, iced tea, and apple blueberry cobbler.
And you said you made this. So.
Well, that was the menu for the day.
Okay.
The ladies taught us how to do that, so we were doing that. That was the fare for the day.
Right. But this wasn't a home ec class. This is actually doing it over an open fire.
We were at the Tully Smith Open Hearth.
Okay.
Kitchen in Atlanta. And so when I came back to North Carolina, I had previously helped build a cabin at Latta Plantation.
Okay.
So when I came back home, I went out there and I asked the lady, I must have been pretty bold, but or what I would say is eager.
Right.
Enthusiastic. I said, would you like to have somebody cook in the cabin? And she said, oh, yes, that would be great. I started cooking there. And at that particular time, Carl, there wasn't very much of that going on.
So you went to a class and you immediately implemented what you had learned.
Right.
Okay. All right. Got it.
It was a way to know what my grandmother's lives were like, before a wood cook stove.
So let's talk about that for a minute. What did that mean to you? So you said it was a way for you to know your ancestors and what they did. What did that mean to you? Why was that important to you to have that experience?
You can read about something in a book, or you can look at pictures, but when you put your hands to it and your mind, and you have to think through something and actually go through the motions, there's a connection.
With what?
Well, there's a connection with a lifestyle that I wanted to know more about. I wanted that experience. And I had just helped build a log cabin. It was a log cabin construction class from CPCC.
Okay.
Hardest work I've ever done in my life.
Right.
I thought I was going to die. But it's putting feet and action to an idea or a dream or a thought. And it makes it meaningful.
Let's talk about that for a moment, Mary. We look at society now. We, not far from either one of us, we have our devices, and I've got mine turned off, but I know it's there, and I can turn it on, and I can communicate with friends all over the world. I can send documents. I can do all sorts of things with this, but I can't do what you're describing. I can't, be in front of an open fire and cook or hunt. Yeah, I can't get that tactile experience. So as you've gone through that process of connecting to your past, if you will, with these things that you've learned to do, and then shared it with other people, how have you seen, how has it changed your life, and how have you witnessed it changing other people's life? I don't know if changing is the right word, but just that thing of discovery, right?
Cooking on the fireplace is a common denominator for drawing people. All kinds of backgrounds from different nationalities. No, it's a common ground at the hearth.
Okay.
And people associate with it. I mean, they connect. They're fascinated by it. They want to know about it. The smell of food, the smell of fire. How do you do this? And one of the questions that I'm most often asked is, well, how long does it take to cook?
Right.
I cannot tell you. There's in an old cookbook it says cook until done.
Right.
But it's a way to connect people, and I've made so many friends through that connection, and people are drawn to it, and it's a wonderful way to teach history, to teach local history, to teach family history, to teach science or math or literature. There's so many things connected with open hearth cooking. You just pick and choose whatever avenue you want to use for teaching or for conversation.
So as long as you've got a fire somewhere, you can build a fire, and the power goes out, you can still eat, right?
Yes, if you're willing to do the work.
Right. Of course. Has that been something as you've shared this with younger people? And I know you do a lot of educational programs when they're completely used to the convenience of microwaves and kitchens that have everything for us today. What's that interact? Is there a sense of amazement?
Oh, sure.
Right.
Is that a real chicken?
Right.
Are those real eggs? Is that a real fire? I've been asked those questions.
Right.
Is that real smoke? Really? And it's because
they never had that experience.
Because they haven't had that experience.
Right.
I mean, that is actually from some adults, but they love it. I've never, children, older people, it really resonates with older people who remember their grandmothers cooking on a wood stove.
Memories.
Memories.
Right.
Correct.
Bringing those memories back. Well, that's great. So now you have this foundation with all sorts of history and actually getting your hands dirty with it, if you will, living a bit of that life. Share with us how Daniel Boone became part of your life.
Well, it's really all connected with history, and it's also connected with North Carolina, I think. I taught North Carolina history eighth grade history for a few years, and of course, Daniel Boone was part of that story. And I've got to be honest with you, I love the television series Daniel Boone.
Right.
Now, a lot of people have issues with that, but that is a television program that really opens the door to introducing people to Daniel Boone. Whether you agree or disagree with, the presentation of it or not, it lets people know about Daniel Boone, and it piques their interest. So they're interested in Daniel Boone.
Right.
And that,
there's a little dating going on there, Mary, because no one can turn their TV on now and watch Daniel Boone. They have to go search for archives to see that, to even know what you're talking about.
Well, you can find it on YouTube.
Yeah, well, that's, of course. And now you can see YouTube on TV.
But anyway, I'm not sure if I can pinpoint the exact time that I connected with that, but several years ago I was asked to join the Daniel Boone Heritage Trail as just a member,
right.
And I did that, and it just my interest in the trail grew from that and developed from that, and then doing research, reading biographies, talking to people, just it's building upon experience, going to different sites.
So let's break that down for a moment, because I think we're fine tuning when it became more formal for you in your work with Daniel Boone. But when you talk about the site, tell us about the work of your organization. So the North Carolina Daniel Boone Historic Trail, what is it? What does it do?
Our organization started about 10 years ago, and the purpose of we're a nonprofit, and our purpose or our mission is to promote Daniel Boone in North Carolina, to tell the story of Daniel Boone in North Carolina, and work with travel and tourism to introduce people to the different places where Daniel Boone lived or where he was, places that we know of, historical markers, and also to do educational interpretation and programming. And hopefully we are going to be concentrating more on getting this into the school system, or for young children, to learn about Daniel Boone. I'm amazed that there are people that don't know that he lived here, or they know very little about him, because they associate him more with Kentucky or Missouri than they do North Carolina. But Daniel Boone was in North Carolina for a good chunk of his life.
Right. So you've got it sounds like the journey. It's not just about Daniel Boone, but you're talking about a period of time that was very important for America. Sure.
Daniel Boone, even in his own time, was looked upon as he was noticed. He was notable. I don't know that you'd say he was a hero, but people knew who he was. They admired him. They looked up to him. He was a very skilled outdoorsman, a long hunter. People would say, today, looking back, but I think even during the time that he was living and then in those years afterwards, he became an icon of American history, a frontiersman, well-known.
And this was the time of the founding of America. This was in the beginning stages of us becoming a country. Right.
So we were the frontier. It's hard to imagine that Wilkes County, Rowan County, Mocksville, or even Boone, North Carolina, that was the frontier.
Right.
And so when you look at Daniel Boone or think about him, and we sort of single him out, but all of our ancestors that were here in this area or who were on the frontier lived a similar life, experienced a similar life. So people can connect, and I think that people have a need to admire someone or look up to someone in this day and age when things are, so many different things are going on in the world.
Our heritage can be comforting. I think it allows us also to face things that we may not agree on now, or the context from then and now are remarkably different. But also, people lived through it. And you're describing something that you love, the interpretive cooking and sharing that story. And for many, that would just seem like the worst thing in the world. I've got to go, build a fire, cook my own food, burn my finger, do all of those things when it can be so convenient. But you're telling a story that I suppose, Mary, if we truly take a look at humanities and look back at time, we've been cooking on the fire a lot longer than we've been using the microwave.
Absolutely. Mm. This was done from the beginning of time, up until someone invented a wood stove, wood cook stove, and then a microwave. Right.
Yep. Well, I know that idea of our heritage and looking back seems to be important. Tim, our producer here, engineer, he certainly spends a lot of time looking back at the past, don't you, Tim?
I sure do.
It's become common that when we get together, I hear he's now, a descendant of yet another emperor. So I know that his family's very broad, very, very broad. So I guess the fascination that we've had with Daniel Boone is that piece of American history. I love that part of our history of the forming of our nation and before, and looking at that journey. It was not an easy time, was it?
Oh, absolutely not. Mm. Things were unsure. You didn't have a weather forecast. Mm. You didn't have a newspaper. And, of course, communication was by horseback or by walking. Mm. And you had to be self-sufficient. You had to know how to survive on your own. And, of course, I do think that families helped each other, but they weren't, a lot of them were not really close to each other, in proximity. They might have been a mile down the road or 2 miles down the road, but the roads were not good in some places. Sometimes it was just a path. You cross a river, you go through the river. Right. And you caught your own food, killed your own game, and it was a different life. But looking back, we think, oh, that was a really hard time. But there are probably people like me that would, I don't know that I would like to say that I would like to go back to them and live that 24/7. But I think that idea is a romantic idea. However, there were hard times. If you got sick, if you broke a leg, if you got cut with an axe, what do? No doctor, no emergency room, and no painkillers. So it was a hard life. But I don't know that they thought it was hard, because that's all they knew. That's the only
thing you knew. I'm sure that there were ways at that time, and we know of the herbal medicines, and when we look back at history, there were ways to mitigate pain. There was it just wasn't maybe in pill form. It was a plant or something. Let's chew on that. That'll take the discomfort away for a moment. Now, we're talking about Daniel Boone because that's the name of the trail.
Correct.
But you have spent a lot of your life with Rebecca Boone. Let's talk about her for a moment.
Rebecca was Daniel Boone's wife, and there's not very much written about her. Her husband was well known, and there's a lot that's been written about him, but very little about Rebecca. And I have often cooked at the Replica Boone Cabin at Whippoorwill. And the cabin is a reproduction cabin, but the original cabin is a very short distance from where Whippoorwill is now located in Ferguson, North Carolina. So many times when I cook at that fireplace, I think about her, and I think about all the children she had, and what was she going to cook? What could she cook for a large family? Maybe up to 10 people, maybe even more. And where would you get the food? What kind of pots did she use? And what kind of ingredients did she have? And, who chopped the firewood? Who brought in the water? And
those are logistics that people listening might say, well, Daniel did a lot of that. He was gone most of the time, right?
I'm sure. Well, I don't know that he did that, whether he was here or not.
Right.
But that would fall to the younger children,
right.
Or some of the, she had, by the time she was in Ferguson, on the Yadkin River at Beaver Creek, they had 8 children. Plus, they probably had some other children they were taking care of. So you're talking about a large family, and you think about 2 meals a day, at least 2 meals a day, cooking enough food for that. And I when I'm at the fireplace, I think about, if I cook for 3 or 4 people, I know about what I've got to do, and I think, my goodness, if I had to cook for a dozen, I might be here all day.
Right. And
it was a full-time job, and cooking was not the only thing that she was doing. There were other things that needed to be done. So,
she had to manage the household. I mean, it was that was her responsibility, right?
Clothing your children, making sure that they had food and shelter,
right?
And so she may not have actually done all of that work. It would have been impossible, but she would have been able to teach or instruct those within her household to be able to do that.
Right. Wow. Well, that's amazing. And with 8 kids, and by the time they got to Ferguson, North Carolina, and lived, they had if I understand correctly, there were more than one cabin that they spent time in Wilkes County, maybe a few different places. But before that, they came from another part of North Carolina, right?
Correct.
So they come from where Daniel Boone's parents lived. And tell us about that journey real quick.
They were before they came to the Yadkin River, further up the Yadkin, I'd say, the upper Yadkin.
Right.
They were at Sugar Tree Creek in Davie County near Advance, North Carolina today. And they lived there for a number of years. But then Daniel wanted to move further out, so they came up. It's approximately 60 miles further west up the Yadkin River and settled in what is now Wilkes County.
Right. And Sugar Creek, that's. I think I was on a field trip with your group, and that's the place that I got the rock from, right?
Right.
Oh, I remember that. My gosh, I was just thinking about being on that land and knowing that they were there, and it's part of not only North Carolina history, the Carolinas, but this is American history.
Yes.
Because his life was so big.
Yes.
Right. Wow. Okay, so they make their way to Wilkes, and his life just blooms from there, I guess, as far as adventures, and he made his way out west, but he would come back and forth, right, for a while.
He came back several times. They had some, but once he left North Carolina, he I think that he called North Carolina or Carolina home,
right,
for a good part of his life. But when he became established in Kentucky or Boonesboro, then
That was home.
That was home.
That was home.
But what we do for the trail is that we want to highlight Daniel Boone in North Carolina and recognize him for what he did here.
Right.
And I mean, he cut the trail for further exploration out west. And it was here in North Carolina that he cut his teeth when, as a young boy, on those outdoor skills and exploration, hunting, finding trails. You know, it's amazing to me that he went out so many different times and was able to get back home.
It wasn't like he was taking an established path, right?
No. It was a wilderness.
Right. It's amazing when we think about that time period. Well, tell me about what people can do to be involved. Let's talk about how people are responding to the work of your organization.
You can participate by becoming a member. You could participate by, coming to our events.
Well, first, let's get them to the website. How do they get to the website?
The website is North Carolina, ncdanielboone.org.
Okay, ncdanielboone.org. So people can go there and they'll see all types of information.
Right. For example, we have a lot of photographs. We have all of our newsletters. One of their latest newsletter just went out this week, and
this one right here, right there.
It's posted on the website. There are links. There are calendar of events, and there's a lot of articles about Daniel Boone and history about Daniel Boone in North Carolina.
So that's what's there. Are people getting excited? Are the communities, because it's individuals who can follow along with the journey, but then there are communities, right? That have some connection to the Boone. It's called a trail for a reason, right?
Right.
So talk about that.
Well, there's what I have seen in the last few years is more of an excitement or interest blooming on Daniel Boone. Of course, we're coming up on the 250th anniversary of American independence, and that's bringing a lot of highlight to our colonial history. But the Daniel Boone Cave in Lexington, North Carolina, is a good place to go. It's a good place to start the journey. And of course, the Boones were there, and it's just a great place to go to see the river, to see the cave, and to be a part of Daniel Boone's life. And then you have activities in Mocksville coming up on May the 7th. The Daniel Boone Family Festival is there.
And that's an annual event?
That's an annual event. Right. And there's food and fun and history there. So that's coming up. And we are working with Mocksville on getting that done. And then on June the 11th, they're celebrating Daniel Boone Day at Hickory Ridge Living History Museum in Boone. And we help participate with them. So what we want to be able to do is to collaborate with other historic sites. We've got plans to do something at Fort Dobbs. We're hoping to do something at Bethabara, and connect and collaborate with other historic sites to promote Boone and bring on an interest in Boone in North Carolina, and teach people and let them know that Boone was here. And there's just all sorts of places that you can go and know that Boone was in that vicinity, and his family and Rebecca and the children and other people too.
Wow. Well, what I think is fantastic, Mary, is that you and I have spent a little over a half hour talking, and there are so many points we could have gone this way or that way, and we could be here for days.
That's right.
And that's why it's such a rich story. There's so many great things about, not only discovering that Daniel Boone and Rebecca, that was a real family. It was a real family, and there's so many different things that we can learn from that. And the best news of all, I think, is that it speaks to that, once again, that founding of America and a lot of those difficult, complicated things that we as a nation had to go through. And Daniel Boone was right there in the middle of it all.
Correct.
Yeah.
He was.
That's great. That's Mary. It's been great spending time with you. Always have a great time when we sit down and talk about American history. We talk about Daniel Boone. I think what makes it so special talking with you is that you truly embrace it. You're sharing in that what you call an ancestral experience. So you literally connect by doing things with the interpretive cooking and now the official nature of the Daniel Boone Heritage Trail. I just think that's great. We appreciate that, and we'll continue to follow because we like that part of our history, because we think the more we know from our past, the better we can move to our future.
Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Appreciate
Mary.
it.
Thanks for listening to the Life in the Carolinas podcast. If you enjoyed your time with us, please visit the show's website at lifeinthecarolinas.com. Join our mailing list, and we'll keep you updated every week on what we have coming up and other interesting things around the Carolinas. We value you as a podcast subscriber. We'll see you next week. And remember what Carl says, it's never a bad time for a good story.